Well, we got bamboozled, we got baited. I pointed out that we were getting some early Christmas gift from Blizzard about receiving some more balanced tuning to the specs and classes right before we entered the Christmas holidays. Looks like Blizzard had something else in mind in terms of a Christmas gift, which was the announcement of the 2024 roadmap for World of Warcraft, including, of course, what they plan to do when it comes to the patches, to the releases of the Dragonflight schedule of content up until the release of the next expansion. Actually, up until the patch after the release of the next expansion. This is quite cool because we get to answer some of the questions we had right back then at BlizzCon during the announcement of the next expansion. You know, the announcement of the next expansion pointed out that it was going to come out before the 31st of December of 2024. Players assumed at that point that the expansion was going to come basically 1 year after the announcement at BlizzCon. It was going to come out next November, even December perhaps. This one, Dragonflight, was going to be another 2 years long expansion cycle, which made some players a bit depressed or sad at the idea that Season 3 was launching in November 2023, which meant we had to wait 12 plus months for the release of the next expansion. And this came at the same time as Blizzard telling us Season 3 is also the last big season of the expansion. There's not going to be a proper Season 4, there's not going to be a new raid, a new set of dungeons, a new zone to go in. Season 3 is the end. So with that knowledge and the idea of having to wait for 12 plus months, you know, that there was a little bit of a bittersweet feeling about the ending part of this expansion. So with this roadmap, we get to actually change a little bit of this impression on just how long of a time there is going to be before the release of the next expansion. Because what we knew already, of course, was 10.2.5, the Seeds of Renewal patch, which was already announced and planned to come out in the first week or so of the next year. But that was already something we knew about. At that point, it was only a matter of trying to slot in all of the other patches before the next expansion. Blizzard also pointed out, right during BlizzCon, that they were going to commit themselves to follow an 8 weeks patch cycle in the latter part of Dragonflight. So once we know that 10.2.5 is going to come out the first week or so of January, we can sort of try to guess the rest, because between January and September you have essentially 3 patches to slot in: 10.2.6, 2.7, and then the pre-patch, and then in the middle of those there's gonna be Season 4. Just by looking at the timeline itself, it looks like 10.2.6 is right between winter and spring, so following the 8-week cycle it will be out more or less in March. You also see that 10.2.7 is by the end of spring, so 10.2.7 would be out in June, at the very least before the beginning of summer, and the pre-patch of the next expansion would be out inside summer, somewhere around August. Very early August, late July, to give you a month or so of pre-patch before the next expansion, as it is common to have a month-ish long pre-patch before the release of the expansion. So with those timers put in place, what's left is Season 4. Season 4 here being somewhere into spring, so the possible guess would be April to May. Somewhere like late April would be a possible timing for the release of Season 4. Now, there is a question, of course, as you can see yourself from the roadmap itself. The War Within is carefully placed right at the edge between summer and autumn. Now, in case you're not aware, by the way, autumn begins on the 21st of September. So, with the expansion being right at the edge, we can assume the 8 weeks patch cycle to be somewhat correct in this sense. So at least gauging from this roadmap, Blizzard seems to be following their own advice of trying to release patches on an 8 weeks cycle in this second part of the Dragonflight expansion. There are some extras in this announcement, like for example the mysterious Skull 10.2.6 patch, which has no data, no info, and no mention about, but it's supposedly placed between the Seeds of Renewal patch coming out in, how much is that? In 3 weeks, more or less, and Season 4. You're getting some surprise mid-patch without yet anything quite clear about it. And then you have the two extra bits that go beyond just the patches of the standard game, which are the alpha and the beta of the next expansion. This is an interesting bit, because while the alpha, which would give you a 7-ish months long alpha for the next expansion, what is more interesting is the release of the beta. As you can see, the War Within beta, which, perhaps without too much excitement from the player base, is now also tied to the Elux Mega Giga edition of the next expansion, where you can buy that version and get guaranteed access to the beta. It's supposedly planned to come out right at the edge of spring and summer. So basically, right at the beginning of summer is when the beta would begin. The beginning of summer, once more to those unaware, is the 21st of June. Meaning, if the beta becomes available on the 21st of June, and we assume that the next expansion is out in September, this would make the beta barely, not even 3 months long. Because from the 21st or so of June to the early September that this expansion is supposedly coming out, it's about 3 months, not even. That would make it a quite short duration for a beta cycle. It would be somewhere in the realm of 80 to 90 days. And this seems to be in line with what we have had with Dragonflight, because the entire release time of alpha plus beta of Dragonflight was 190 days long, more or less. So it was roughly 6 months. It is less than pretty much almost every other expansion, and significantly less than all of the older ones, the older days. BFA was quite quick, the only one that was slightly quicker, with a very fast beta window of 3.5 months. We would get, if this timing is correct compared to the previous expansions, one of the quicker alphas of the game, but more importantly, definitely the quickest beta cycles of all of the previous expansions. If it's on 80 to 90 or so days, it would make for quite the fast beta cycle of the expansion. But then again, this is perhaps part of what Blizzard meant with planning for expansions on a faster developing cycle. They mentioned one of their goals was to release expansions not lasting anymore a couple of years, not having this 2 years long cycle. So perhaps maybe developing an expansion planned for maybe 18 months, for example, 1.5 years, might also make it so that the beta development cycle for the expansion is also shorter. These are so far the planned timings of the Dragonflight second part of the expansion. I think it's quite positive. I think it's beating most people's expectations in terms of the content available before the release of the next expansion. Up to just a few days ago, players were perhaps expecting, oh well, now from this point on it's just gonna get boring. You know, this season has already been out for almost 40 days, and now we get the Christmas holidays and New Year's, and when that's over, we have like 3 more months of nothing before a Fated season nobody will care about, and then after the Fated season comes out in April or March, we have to wait until December of the next year with nothing but 7 months or 8 months of this Fated season. Looking at the roadmap now, though, it does put the time left for the release of the next expansion in a bit of a better light. It does show to have more content, more packed content before the release of the next expansion, also helped by the fact that the next expansion is planned to come out not nearly as late as we thought. I'm assuming most players were on the November-December timeline for the next expansion, which is now on August to September. So we are at least going backwards by a couple of months minimum when it comes to the release date of the next expansion. So it's already a plus. That's already good. And then you have other additions, other things like the 10.2.7 with some interesting bits. The fact that even as you wait for the next expansion, there is still going to be the beta available. So shortly by the end of spring, you know, already in June, you will start getting into the beta of the expansion. So even if you have to wait for September, you might be able to get in the beta anyways and start testing all the new things of the expansion, for example. So I think this was a good time, a good decision from Blizzard to plan the release of this roadmap right at the end of this year. As we get into 2024, now you get the idea of what the roadmap will look like, and it does look better than what I would say most players expected when it comes to what is the path, what is the schedule for the release of content for Dragonflight and then the following expansion. So this was today's point about the announced roadmap from Blizzard based on the content that will come out in what we can still assume an 8 weeks cycle until the release of the next expansion. Or maybe you lived under a rock and you still thought Season 4 was going to be a proper season. Still, whichever was your point, let me guys know down in the comments as we leave each other for today on this Wednesday. We can now leave each other, starting to thank all of the dear Patreon supporters for the contribution and the help to the growth of the channel, which can, as usual, also be given completely for free. You can like and comment down below, as well as subscribe to the channel itself. Now, with these points out of the way, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys, tomorrow. And in the meantime, I could have undressed. I just came back. I just came home from buying some things at the store, but I'm kind of comfy, actually. I like this.